Welcome, TEI family, to another episode of The Everyday Investor. Today, we have a very special guest. This gentleman has worked at some of the top law firms, not only in the country, but in the world. He also has his hand in a lot of different business ventures. He definitely has invested in himself over the years. Please help me welcome Taylor Weaver. How's it
How's it
going,
going?
Taylor? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Am I good on my? You can hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool.
No, we're all good, man. How's
All
it
right.
going? I know this is it's pretty early here, but I'm glad you're able to kind of talk to us a little bit about your just kind of you and your life and kind of upbringing and things like that. Today, we're glad to have you on.
Yeah, I would say, man, it's not early, man. I've been up for a few hours, so you late. No, I'm sure. Cool.
Well, my bad. No, yeah. So I guess the point of my podcast is just trying to bring on interview people who have invested in themselves over the years and acquired a skill and be able to use that skill to increase their earning potential and then take those that increased earning potential and invest in different things such as stocks, real estate, businesses, so forth and so on. Obviously, you have did a number of those things, and I thought that it'd be good for you to come on and share a little bit about your story and talk to us and hopefully myself as well as the TEI family. We can glean some good things to be able to take with us going forward after the interview. Uh, so I always like to start with just the upbringing. How did you grow up? Me myself, for example, I was maybe the lower, middle class growing up from a financial standpoint. I did have all the love from family and friends growing up, and that made kind of my childhood very enriching. But in terms of the financial component of it, really didn't have a whole lot of money. We had what we need, but kind of looking back on it, we didn't have a whole lot of money. So how did you grow up on your end, and where are you from?
Yeah, no, I'm from Georgia, Atlanta. So, well,
Mhm.
north side Atlanta. So, in terms of wealth wise, we were middle class. I feel like that special with Dave Chappelle. He's like, we were just enough. We weren't poor. We were
Yeah,
just enough to know that we ain't have it like that.
right.
My dad, man, he did an unbelievable job. I never went wanting for anything.
Okay,
Of course, lifestyle is different now, but that's just from exposure. But
right.
for the most part, it was a single parent household. I grew up with my mom and my dad until I was about 10, and then they separated, and then it was just me and him rolling for the
Okay,
remaining of the time. But yeah, he never made it to a situation. It never felt like we wanted anything. I mean, he always kept a stable gig. He did his part. I tried to do my part. But yeah, it was fine.
okay. Now, did he grow up talking about money? I know a lot of times, especially in the African American, or the kind of just growing up as an African American, I don't want to say, oh, just not having a whole lot of money. Parents or just family, they don't really talk about money for whatever reason. So, did he kind of talk to you about money and being able to make money and saving money and investing money growing up, or was it just one of those things that kind of knew it existed or we needed money to live, but it wasn't a whole lot of talk surrounding money and growing your money growing up?
So my pops, he drove the conversation about frugality, like living below your means. That was his big thing. He was
Okay.
like, "Yo, make sure you got enough saved up for 4 to 6 months of living, because at any given point, then you never know. And if you have kids, you try to get more than that to the best of your ability."
Right.
Um, and then in terms of actually going to get money, he kind of let me drive that. In terms of, he was like, "Hey, if you want to be wealthy, I can tell you and teach you tips and secrets based on the knowledge he had, because he wasn't wealthy, but he was like, I can show you what other people have done. I
Right.
can give you the formula based on what I've read, but it was purely based on my desire to do it. And so
Right.
because I wanted to be that way, he was like, he shared different things. And he was like, all right, well, you need to do this. If you options, you can go into law, you can be a doctor, be a sports person. And of course, where I'm from, same as yours, I was like, oh, I'm gonna play ball.
Right, for sure, for sure. So I guess, and kind of jumping ahead a little bit, with any future kids you have or you may have, how would you kind of do things differently, if at all? Would you kind of, because I mean, obviously you are growing up a lot more, I guess with a lot more money, I would say, than maybe what your parents grew up with. So how does that change the narrative of how you talk to how you're going to talk to your kids about money? Because, for example, for me, it wasn't a real conversation. To be honest, the only time like my mom brought it up was, well, this wasn't the only time, but a lot of times when she brought it up to say, hey, we can't do this or we can't afford this, and maybe that was for whatever reason, but she did give us a lot of our wants growing up, but it wasn't a real like conversation about money and investing it and growing it, things like that. I kind of really talk to my mom now about money as an adult, but no, with my future kids, I'll definitely make it a point as they're growing up to talk to them more about money, especially investing and kind of growing your money. So, would you do anything differently compared to what your dad did, or kind of taught you about money growing up?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, I feel like it's like you said, we come from completely different circumstances.
For
Like,
sure.
right now, even 4 years ago, I made more money, in every single year than my dad had ever made. And so again, that resource is going to be a lot different than
Right.
what I had growing up. Like I'd go to people's houses and I'd see, again, when I went to the private school for 6 months, call it, I saw people's houses and they had TV screens coming out of ovens and we ain't had it. I didn't have a TV in my room. I had two pairs of
Okay.
shoes. Again, wasn't poor. He made sure that I was good, and it was
Right.
just, we didn't have it like that. So I think that drive isn't going to be there for my kids. So it's probably going to be more of a teaching of responsibility
Okay.
and stewardship as opposed to, hey, here's how you go get it.
Yeah.
Because ideally, whether I have kids in the next year, God willing, or the next 3 years or 4 years, again, that's going to determine, what lifestyle they grow up in. And they're never going to be in a situation where they go to somebody's house and go, oh man, this person got it like we don't. Like,
Right.
and that's blessing by the grace of God. I can be in a situation where there's never a situation unless, we go to Bill Gates' house or Jeff Bezos' crib
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
people go, oh man, this person's just blowing us out the water, so
Right.
yeah.
Right. So okay, so then okay, your pops, and that's a good point because I think a lot of times, especially growing up, especially in our community, we tend to overspend a lot
Mhm.
and make it look like we have it, although we actually don't have it, but we overspend. So that was good that your dad was able to teach you about frugality and not overspending and things like that. I think that's something that I'm a big proponent of at this point. But kind of fast forward in here, so now you're in high school, you're about to graduate high school, and uh, did your parents talk to you about going to college, going to get a skilled trade? What was that conversation like for post high school activities?
So I had always been talking about going to college because again, I chose that I want to play ball route. So I was like, man,
Okay.
I'm going to play for the Hurricanes.
Right,
That
right,
didn't
right.
happen, but it was just always a mindset where no matter what, I'm going to college.
Okay.
And honestly, I looked at it kind of one and the same. It was, hey, I have to go play ball, in order to get to the league. And so it was never really do I want to go or is there something else I might want to do? It was just kind of a part of the plan. Now, I didn't end up playing football professionally at least, but it was one of those things where, it wasn't really a discussion that we had to have.
Okay. Okay. And then, so I know you decided to go to SMU, which is Southern Methodist University. I guess, what was that the only college that accepted you? What kind of brought on that decision to go to that school?
Yeah, opportunity. So it was an interesting high school experience. I was injury prone, and so I had a lot of colleges that took interest in me and were like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna offer you just finish a full season."
Yeah.
And then when I couldn't, they pulled it, and so I had the opportunity because one of my trainers played with the coach of SMU, and by the grace of God, he was like, "Yo, give this kid a shot. He's at least a good kid.
Right.
He's a leader. He'll bring energy to the team and could potentially do something great." And so SMU ended up being one of the few options I had. The other options just didn't have, I want to say, the best education programs. And then
Yeah.
also, I don't want to say fooled because it was a great experience, but I got brought in by that campus feel. The place was beautiful. They had fountains everywhere, and it was more than what I had seen. So I was like,
Right.
I'm going here.
Gotcha. So now you're at SMU. How was that experience? It seems like you're playing football there. Are things going good? Is it eye opening? I know, coming from a small town of Muskegon and uh, going to a university such as Michigan State University, that was, it was eye opening because it's obviously a PWI, and even though I went to a suburban high school for a portion of high school, it was still 40,000 people. I mean, the campus was bigger than my town that I was from. So that was definitely an eye-opening experience, and it took me an adjustment.
Mhm.
in terms of trying to get into the swing of things, especially while playing football at Michigan State. So how was your adjustment, so to speak, of going from Atlanta to SMU, and now you're in there, you're playing football, you're adjusting to school and football and classes and things like that. How was that?
So I struggled actually, and it was and it's a perfect way to put it, eye-opening. Number one, to have complete freedom. You
Yeah.
got to be responsible at that point as an adult. I didn't have any family members in Texas. Number two, there is so much money on that campus. It's ridiculous. I remember this. There was a story about this one girl who was dating a teammate of mine, and she had like stopped talking to her dad for 6 months because he didn't give her a pink Range Rover, one of the big boys. He got her a blue one. I was like, yo, he adopting anybody? You know what I mean? So I was
Right,
like,
right, right,
I was
right.
like, man, I'll call him Pops. You know what I mean? And so like that blew my mind. Or people who would go and take helicopter rides,
Yeah.
to some spot to go grab lunch. So that was crazy to me. It was almost as if it was out of touch of reality because there was so much money there. You'd see Audi R8s on campus, people driving
Wow.
McLarens and things like that. And so if anything, it extended or made it even more excessive the feeling of want and the desire and going, yo, why is
Yeah.
it that I'm walking or catching the bus to school, we're riding with
Right,
teammates and we got broken down whips. And like
right,
this person over here, same age as me, I know he hasn't had a job, he or she,
right.
and
Yeah.
they're living our dreams. So that
Right.
was a big difference. But then again, going back to the freedom piece, I didn't have the discipline in terms of studying, uh, primarily because for better or for worse, it's not, I can't blame it on my pops. My dad made it so that way I didn't need to study growing up.
Okay.
When I was in fourth grade, fifth grade, and every summer thereafter, he would have me reading his college textbooks and summarizing them in pen. And if I made a
Wow.
mistake, I had to
Wow.
re-summarize them. And that's what I did over the summers, that and work out. And
Okay.
so I got to the point where I just didn't need to study. I was always good at test taking because I knew the answer. And so when I got to college, there's a big piece in there called participation points, and that was carrying, the lion's share of the grade, call it 60%. So you can go get 100 on the exam if you want. If you don't show up to class, well, that's 60 minus 100 or 100 minus 60.
Right.
So I had a really tough experience that first year, and I ended up getting suspended for academics.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And so I ended up working in Houston. I couldn't go back home. My pop was like, nah, we ain't
Right.
doing that.
You gotta
It's
figure
different
it
in
out.
black communities. You know how it is. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's like,
yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
you need to figure that out. So I
Yeah.
stayed. I went to Houston, worked at Domino's Pizza in Pearland, Texas. And I was out there holding that, two pizza, medium toppings, $5.99 on the side of the street while my boys were playing ball on TV. And it was the second year, it was the second year for them, or would have been for me,
Right.
was the year after our first year going back to a bowl game in 25 years. So I missed that whole experience. And that woke me up, because I had sat there, I talked to a dude who was there and he was like, yo, you got potential, man. You 19 years old. Me, I'm 36. I gotta do this, and I gotta go home to my wife and kids because it puts food on the table.
Yeah.
So if you want to be like me, more than welcome. I can give you a couple extra outfits because you can grow into them.
Right, right.
He was like, but if I had the opportunity you had, I wouldn't blow it. And so I got back to school, man, and my GPA never went under a 3.5 again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing. So you ended up finishing off at SMU then, and it seems like once you re-enrolled, you didn't play football. You just kind of stuck to school and just kind of got the education.
Yeah, yeah, I did. I did. It was a really different experience because when I first got there, I was there for football, and then when I came back, I was there
Right.
for school. And
Right.
so, it was no more going to class in sweatpants, hoodies. I
Yeah.
showed up in some corny jeans. I went back to my staple, which was, yo, you have two pairs of shoes. And I went in. I didn't care about anything else other than, I just got to get out because I got to figure out a way to make money.
Okay. Okay. And then it seems like kind of growing up, your dad was a big mentor to you. How was kind of that time period in college as far as mentorship? Did your dad continue to be a big mentor to you, or was it others in addition to your dad that kind of played a mentorship role that you leaned on to kind of help you get through college?
It was a little tough because I mean, as you can imagine, you got a parent who made their own sweatpants in high school.
Yeah.
He didn't have nothing. And so
Right.
he paved this way for us to have an incredible opportunity, and I blew it. And so it was tough. Our relationship got a little bit strained, but
Okay.
I could always hear his voice in the back of my head. And the things that he had said when I was growing up started making more sense.
Gotcha.
So that was a big piece of it. I was still talking to him, and now I talk to him like every single day, sometimes more than twice because we work together too. But a lot of the mentorship came from professors. So I had some really great teachers, some really, not so great ones, but I had some incredible professors. I can name them, James Hollyfield, Bruce Levy, Keiko Flores, Chelsea Brown, Google them if you want. There's some really good people who sat there and took interest in me. Megan Nixon, who said, hey, there's something different about you.
Yeah.
And because of that, they continued to push the ball when, I had somewhat become estranged from other people who would normally did in the past. So that was a interesting experience, and also taught me to broaden my horizon.
Sure.
Because prior to this point, and again, Atlanta, most of the people there are doing well, black. You know what I mean?
Right.
But when I got to
Absolutely.
SMU, most of them were white or Jewish background, things like that, and that just it turned my world upside down because they were the ones supporting me. So
No, and again, I mean, I think that's important. I think, as I was kind of going through Michigan State in undergrad, my cousin, he was a big mentor to me, and kind of actually the one telling me to do engineering to get my engineering degree. But also, I remember you kind of talk about your professors. I have one, my math professor in particular. She, I call her my spiritual mother to this day. She was very instrumental in me. Actually, my lowest grade in college, and I did my engineering degree, was in her trigonometry class. But she helped me so much when I was going through the calculus one and the calculus courses, and going through different things, classes at Michigan State. She was helping me going through the engineering. When I was going through the engineering classes, she was helping me when I had tough personal situations with brother passing away and stuff like that. She was there. So no, yeah, those mentors, they're definitely big to have as especially when you're away from home like that, to give you encouragement and continue to kind of just give you motivation to keep going.
it's funny you said that too, that was your lowest grade, and it's not always the person who gives us what we want.
Right.
Like
Right.
Megan Nixon, for example, she was the first person who told me like my writing was trash. I had no idea,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I had gotten in the habit of, what's the page length? What's the
Right.
requirement? Are
Yep.
we gonna get there?
You're
Yeah,
gonna get
I
that.
don't care
Right.
how many words is on there. And I
Yep.
remember she looked at my paper and she was like, Taylor, when you look at it, it looks like you're saying some really impressive stuff, but then you go back, you read it again, and you're like, you didn't really say anything. And I was like, she's like, no, read this sentence for me. So she made me read it in front of her. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I didn't have to read it. I knew what I wrote.
Right.
And
Right.
so then
Right.
she's the one who taught me, like, hey, every sentence should serve two purposes. It's either setting up the next sentence, or it is the sentence that you're setting up, but it has to have value to it. And
Right.
it's like, and again, she didn't have to do that. She didn't look like me. She didn't have a similar background, but
Right.
she invested that time in me, similar to your trig professor. So
Right.
yeah.
For sure. No, and that's important, man. I always tell people all the time, man. Mentors are very important. They kind of give you encouragement. Again, they're although you end up being good friends with them later on in life, or whatever the case may be. It's kind of tough love going through it, man. They're giving you constructive criticism. And if you're willing to not take those things personally, but to try to get better from them, I mean, they're going to be a big asset to you. And I think everyone, regardless of where you're at in life, whether it's high school, college, or even at this point in time, I still have mentors. So I think that's uh, very important for people to have. And it seems like you have a similar experience with kind of having mentors along the way that have helped you become who you are today.
Mhm. That's true. Yeah. And I had to give credit too to another guy, Arnold Regas. He was still is a good mentor of mine. He's the reason why I actually went into law. And my dad said early on, it was like, yo, be a judge, because man who makes the rules is in charge. Growing up, now I know legal system's a little bit more complex than that. And hats off to him. He's IT. If we speak IT, I have no idea what he's talking about. So, but Arnold, man, he was a state judge, and he was like, man, they were paying kids, I think he said $1,500 a week back in my day. And I was like, me, I'm not an economist, but I was like, man, based on inflation, that price has to change.
Yeah,
So I went
absolutely.
and Googled, and found out what it was today, or back then in 2012. That was the time I figured it out. I was like, I'm gonna be a lawyer. These cats is making ball player money. So I was like, cool.
Now, and that's a good segue, because I was going to ask you, okay, you're graduating SMU. What kind of was your decision of, okay, what's next? Do I go get a graduate degree? Do I get a law degree? Do I just start working? So it seems like this gentleman that you just spoke of was instrumental in your decision to go to law school. Was it any other factors that played a role in you going to law school?
Football wasn't an option. I didn't see myself doing anything other than football.
Okay.
And it's interesting to say that because you would think if somebody has that mentality, they
Right.
have a level of focus that gets them there.
Yep.
But I didn't have that level of focus. And so again, I spoke to Arnold. He told me about the salaries, and I was like, well, I need to figure out a way to sustain the life that I think I want.
Right.
Because I know where I'm at right now. When I was thinking, I was like, where I'm at right now, this isn't it.
Yeah.
So I was like, I need to figure out a way to make this type of money. And so law was really the only option. I told you before, I had a Bachelor of Arts. And so
Yeah.
I had international studies, major, minor in Japanese and poli-sci. I had two options, be a teacher
Yeah.
or go to law school. And so, law school was the only option. So that's what I did.
Okay. No, and that's I guess, great point before we kind of go into kind of how did you choose a law school? If you can do it over again from an undergrad standpoint, because I always tell people, man, it's obviously I have an engineering undergrad degree, which I think that's very valuable. But it's just some degrees that and I just it just doesn't make sense to get. So if you can do it all over again, would you do a or would you major in bachelor of arts, or would you go into something else?
Man, I'm telling you right now, if I could do it all over again, I'd either went to Harvard or Princeton or or Brown on full scholarship for football, broke every record, man. They'd have been like, yo, you going to the NFL? Nope. I'm
Right.
going into private equity. That's it. Because one of my guys who I have touch points with at least once a year, man, he's a partner at Thoma Bravo. Dude just bought a $10 million crib in Miami. It's in the
Wow.
newspaper, and it probably didn't even touch his pockets. Like, it was just like, so if I could do it all over again, if I knew what was out there,
Yeah.
I'd go, get a bachelor's science and, something in business related, but I'd have gone to an Ivy League school
Yeah.
and I would have been at Thoma Bravo.
Right.
Or,
No, look, and it's very interesting that you said that, because I was at the gym the other day and I was talking to someone, and my first ever football recruiting letter in a 10th grade was to Princeton University. And a lot of other Ivy League schools followed thereafter. But just kind of growing up, it was always pushed, man. You need to go to a Power 5 school. You need to, play football for one of those teams, because that's going to give you the best chance to get to the next level. But kind of looking back on it now, like you said, I definitely wish I would have kind of went that route, and like you said, went there, balled out, and even got an engineering degree. And man, it would have been I would have been.
I'm glad you did, man, because you might not be talking to me right
Yeah,
now, or
for
better
sure.
yet,
No, that's
I might be
true.
working for you.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
Not interviewing me like, yo, Taylor, where is my, I need this by 8.
Right.
Yeah, because there's so much money out there in different
Yeah.
industries, and we just
Yep.
didn't know, man. I
Absolutely.
remember a teammate of mine in high school. He was a 5-star athlete, and I was talking to his mom. She said, "Oh, what you gonna do if football doesn't work out?" I was like, "I don't know. What are you talking about?
Right.
Maybe law." And she was like, "There's no money in law," and I'm like, had no idea. There's people here who make 40. They're the top for sure, but they make like $45 million a year.
Wow.
And then you got average folks who make $10 million a year.
Right.
And this isn't like, oh, you can only play for 10 years. No,
Yeah.
it's you can do this till you're 65
Yeah,
or
20,
until
30
you,
years.
and that's a different level of wealth.
Yep.
That's a
Yep.
different level of wealth, man. We just had no idea. So yeah, that's funny you said Princeton, because I had Georgetown. Georgetown offered me, and I went and saw the stadium, and I was like, I'm not coming to play here. I was like, man, I'm going to the league. I'm trying to make money.
Right.
Little did I know.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons for this channel, because I want to be able to kind of talk to very successful people such as yourself, to give their experience, to provide that information, so other people watching it, they are not getting like misinformation from people who just don't know because they haven't been there. Again, just think of somebody who, again, no disrespect or to anyone, but somebody who's making 40, 50 grand trying to tell you how to make $1 million, trying to make $500,000. It's just so far from their reality that it's almost like they're going to give you unconsciously misinformation, because they just don't know any better. And in some ways they can be jaded, when you're 40, 45 and things didn't work out the way you wanted to. And that's why the guy from Domino's giving you that advice, I think that was solid advice, because a lot of people who are maybe in less fortunate situations, they can take a jaded approach, especially when mentoring other people. So
Yeah,
well,
and
no,
it's
go ahead.
interesting you said that because again, somebody again, not knocking anybody that makes 40 to 50K, but if you're talking to somebody who again is not your kid, and yeah, it's like you said, misinformation, it's so dangerous. And I think that dude at Domino's, man, it was so powerful because he didn't say, "Hey Taylor, here's what you need to do." He said, "Yo, here's what you don't want to do."
Right.
So if you want to end up like me, do
Yeah.
this. There's nothing wrong with Domino's. Still love Domino's pizza.
No, for sure.
Can't eat it anymore because I'm not young like that. But
Yeah,
but
yeah.
still love Domino's. But he said, don't be like me. Try your whatever you got going on unless you want to be here. And I think that was powerful. And I think if more people who weren't in the situation that somebody's looking up to or trying to be at had that mentality of, okay, I know you don't want to be where I'm at. Well, here's what I did. Try to avoid these pitfalls. I think it would be much more powerful.
No, that makes perfect sense. So, okay, so now you decided you're going to be all in law school.
Mhm.
How, what's the decision to go? What law school are you? How do you choose what law school to go to? So I know for myself, it was like 4 or 5 law schools who accepted me, but Michigan State just gave me the most money. It was a 75% scholarship. So I think law school for me was like 110 grand, and they were essentially giving me 82,000, and no one else was doing that. So that made my decision very easy. Plus, I was already familiar with the campus and things like that. So for you, what was your decision and things that you considered when making your decision to go to law school, or what law school to go to?
Yeah, so I didn't really even know about law schools, honestly. Like I think I saw Legally Blonde like the day before we went to Michigan State. I was like, people are gonna be talking about it, so I should probably get some background info on it. But I didn't know about law schools. I knew about Harvard Law and I
Yeah.
knew about Georgetown. And the reason why I knew about Georgetown is because they offered scholarship while I was in high school, and I'm not going here. And they said, hey, if you come in our program, it sets you up with a really great opportunity to potentially go into our law school. My dad was like, yo, Georgetown Law School is one of the best in the world.
Right.
And that was the end of my exposure. So fast forward, to time to apply. I'm applying to law schools left and right. I applied to 27 schools.
Wow.
Yeah, and got
It's a lot more than
waitlisted.
what I applied to.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I was, by the grace of God, hustling. So it was like I found out you could get fee waivers based on how high your test scores were.
Okay.
And so because of that, I only paid for one application, and I was to Harvard. And I think I was like, all I had to was like the $150 or whatever it was. And so I gave that to them. Somebody put that in their pocket and sent me a rejection notice, back in like 30 minutes or so. But I applied to 27 schools, man, got rejected or waitlisted by all but one, Michigan State.
Wow.
And Michigan State gave me a scholarship offer too. And I remember I waited till the very last minute to accept because I was like, man, I'm waitlisted for, Penn State, for some other ones, for William and Mary. And, I remember the deadline for accepting my scholarship to Michigan State had passed by like 3 weeks or so. And I ain't getting no other offers. And so the lady was like, hey, we just want to know what went wrong. Why did you choose not to go to us so we can build our program? By the grace of God. And again, I had no other option. So I was like,
Right.
wait, I sent in my acceptance. I hit him with that. Yeah, you didn't get my message. So I was like, oh no, actually, I sent it in. I haven't been able to get in contact with her. What y'all got going on? So the lady was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Well, we'll still honor it. I was like, hey, you better,
Hold on. So you the only school that accepted you didn't reply to them.
I didn't reply to them. Yeah. And I
Wow.
looked, and then like I started getting no's and stuff. And then like, call it, a month or two before graduation. I was like, oh man, crap, what am I gonna do? So,
Hey, but out of curiosity, why not? And this is interesting because when I was doing my first summer internship, summer associate, after that first year in law school, and kind of about this, I had agreed to work at a different firm, but a better opportunity that I just couldn't say no to just came about afterwards, and I actually had to rescind my offer at the initial spot that initial law firm that I agreed to work for that summer. So I guess why not take that approach where maybe agree or accept their offer, but if something had opened up, not saying that that's a preferable route to go. obviously, your words in a lot of cases, or in most cases, if not all cases, should kind of, mean something. And but why not take that approach to at least guarantee that you're going to be somewhere?
Well, it's funny you said that. It was in your first internship, but by then we had taken the contracts course. So it's purely just a game of I didn't know. I had no idea. And looking back on it, the safe approach would have been to say, "Hey, I'm gonna accept," and then if something doesn't come down the road, then I'm good to go. But you just didn't know. I didn't have
Okay.
any idea. I had no idea about
Right.
how to handle law school
Okay.
or how to get from Michigan State to Georgetown or how to. I didn't know any. I was googling everything. I
Right.
didn't have any people in my family. The only mentor, like I said, Arnold, he went to Georgia State, which was good law school. But I mean, as far as advice, two parts to that. Number one, early on, as I'm sure most people do, you don't realize the value of mentors, and that if you have somebody who's willing to talk to you about anything, man, bother them until they tell you to beat it. Because in
Right.
my mind, I'm like, yo, I'm only going to this cat, once every 6 months to make sure I don't wear out my welcome, and
Right.
it's really not the case, but I just didn't understand. So had I to talk to him more, maybe I would have had a little bit more info and input. But other than that, I didn't have anyone else. My dad was an IT guy. He's a really great IT guy, but
Right.
it's just law. And so, I mean, I didn't know any lawyers. There are no lawyers. I'm the only one that I know of in my family. And so, you had your cousin, so you could at least lean on him for stuff.
Right.
He said the thing I leaned on was prayer and Google.
Right.
So,
No, and I think that's a good, a good point or addition to the whole mentorship thing, because we talk about mentors and how important they are. There are, but as you're getting, more narrowed in or zoned in on a particular field, it's also important to have mentors in that field as opposed to
yeah,
just kind of general mentors. I think general mentors are good, but uh, it's also important to have mentors in the very thing that you're trying to do, because they're going to be able to give you advice and really take you under their wing and
they're
have
there.
they're
Exactly.
going to have a lot of times they're vested in your success. So they're like, I
Mhm.
know my mentor at the law firm that I worked at out of college for, out of law school for many years, and it was a mentor, Steve Waingro. Man, he was vested in my success. So
Mhm.
he you can tell the things that he was telling me, not only as it relates to just the culture, but just the work product. Man, he was making sure that I had the tools I need to be successful. And I think my situation would have turned out differently if if I didn't have a mentor that was as caring and as vested in
Mhm.
my success as an attorney. So I just think that those mentors and whatever it is that you're doing is very important.
Yeah, it's the difference between saying, "Yo, I got to take a." It's the fairest shortcut, in my opinion. Because if you have a mentor who is there, they're going to tell you.
Yeah.
At least they're going to give you experience that is applicable.
Right.
And
Right.
so you could potentially, skip 10 steps just by following their directions.
Yeah.
And so now that's the role I play, is because when people call me, they're like, hey, my mentees, I tell them so much stuff. Just say, hey, here's what I did. Do not
Yeah.
do this. Here's the easier way. Here's a way to get more money. Here's a way to do that. Here's a way to get it faster. Because I know where you're trying to go. You say you want to be me. That's
Yeah.
cool. But there's a much quicker way and a better way to get there, or a way that's less stressful. And it's just, again, I didn't have that.
Right.
So it's like I had to figure everything out on the fly, or with you, you know.
Right, right. So then, okay, so you're finally enrolled into Michigan State,
Mhm.
and how was that first year? Was it tough? I know for me personally, and I kind of don't like telling people this, but coming from engineering, I thought law school was relatively easy. I didn't have a tough time at all. I think that first year was really good for me, and I actually was doing a lot. I was acquiring property. I was running a business. I was going to law school. I was working. Uh, Man, I was doing a lot of different things, but I think that was kind of going again a testament to, in my opinion, the relative ease at which I kind of was able to get through law school. So how was that for you? Was it a struggle? Was it an adjustment? Did you face adversity? How was that in Michigan State? Because you also are going from essentially the South to the Midwest, where you're kind of dealing with weather and being further away from home and things like that. So how was kind of that adjustment for you?
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because I remember I told you this before too. Like, I saw you the other year, and I was like, man, this dude is doing so much stuff. You are by far, like I say, you're the second hardest working person I know
I
in my
appreciate
life,
that.
second only to my dad. That's
Yeah, I
it. I'm
appreciate
like, yo,
that.
this dude. That's what I told my dad. I was like, man, if I had Dave's work ethic, man, Jeff Bezos would be working for me, because my sheer talent. No, I'm just joking, but no, it was an adjustment. Not so much in location. I've never been tied to location, because people get mixed up with the cognitive dissonance. I always use the glass of water approach. If somebody's really thirsty and there's a glass of water in front of them, but you got 12 doors on each side, they'll go get the water and drink it. But if they're not really thirsty, they're like, oh, what's in door number 1? Oh, what's in door number 2? It's door number 3. 4 days later, they've gotten down there and they've either died, or the water spoiled, or maybe they got to it, but it took a much longer time.
Right.
So I try to zone in and stay focused. And if what is a part of my dream isn't about the weather or the location, who cares?
Yeah.
I want to practice law. I wanted to practice law at a big law firm. It didn't matter where I was at.
Yeah.
So I had no issues with going to Michigan State and being in the winter, with the exception of the fact that it was painful to see snow on the ground for 9 months. I was like, I remember the first month, I was like, this is cool. And I was like, man, the second month, I was like, when is this going to go away? So that was a different experience. But as far as studying goes, the blessing is with that BA, the Bachelor of Arts, I read so much more and wrote so much more in undergrad. So the workload itself wasn't hard. It was the test taking aspects that were challenging.
Okay.
And the fact that my greatest skill set was essentially, they nullified it. And it's because you only get one test in law school. For me, my ability to adapt is what is just like, that's what hits. So like I can go and work with somebody and figure it out. I'm like, okay, cool. I know how they did this. I might not have did great the first time, but then, I know how to do great the second time. And so being with you was a blessing, because I was always working with you and it was very easy for you. And so I just picked up your study skills. I remember, like I said, we were driving, or you were taking me to the crib in exchange for a Pizza House pizza with the cinnamon roll. Right, you take the crib, and like the Jay-Z song was playing, and I'm bumping it. I'm like, going along. I'm like, yeah, double is a lie, and you over there, you like, causation, negligence per se. Is this? I'm like, bro, Jay-Z didn't say nothing about negligence, And I remember you were like, yeah, I recite the not the syllabus, but the outlines. And I was like, that's a 90 page document. You do it for each class. And you're like, yeah. And that was like, all right, well, I guess I got to start reciting the outlines, So I started doing the same thing in the shower, everywhere I went. And then it gradually got easier. And so when we were doing our practice exams, working with you, that is what truly, again, man upstairs puts people in your life for a reason.
Absolutely.
And that's what was able to make it so I was able to be successful in law school.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So then you're facing a big decision after your first year at Michigan State. Do I stay here and finish my law schooling here, or do I transfer? What kind of went into that decision to say, okay, now obviously in hindsight, it turned out to be an amazing decision for you. And maybe even at that point in time, you're transferring from a relatively decent school in Michigan State College of Law to a top law school in the country. So maybe it was as easy as you made it look, but kind of what went into that decision?
Well, it's the cognitive dissonance thing again. It's like the focus, you know what I mean? And that's the thing that another way is that people get really comfortable and then they're not willing to stick to the contract they made with themselves. And so I made that contract going into law school. I said, no matter where I start, I am graduating from Georgetown Law.
Okay.
And so I remember Michigan State was probably the most successful entrance into school I had. I had a rough start freshman year of high school, rough start freshman year of undergrad, really successful experience at Michigan State. I got employed. I had a job that was going to pay us over $100,000 at the time for the internship. Not for the internship itself, but once we graduated.
Right.
And I had you guys, and the school, the environment of the school was great. People actually enjoyed my company and everything, but it was just the level of focus saying, I made a deal with myself. If I got the opportunity to go to Georgetown, I am going. That is my dream school. And it's funny to say that because I didn't really know much about Georgetown. I was just like, again, Harvard and Georgetown, the ones I knew of. And I didn't want to go to Harvard. I wanted to go to Georgetown. And so it wasn't a hard decision. It was funny. I called my dad and my mom, and both of them had, they've been my whole life. So they knew the past struggles. And they were like, I said, hey, I got accepted. And they both had the same reaction. They're like, so what are you going to do? Really, you should hold off. And again, it was their fear in having the bad experiences with me in the past and going, you finally had a good start, stick to it, close out. And I remember I had to tell my pops, I was like, he was like, yo, he said, what are you doing? You need, you know, you able to get employment, just stick this out, stay there, focus and finish. And I was like, pops, man, I'm sorry. I remember this was the weirdest conversation. I was like, I didn't call for permission. The decision was made once they let
Right.
me in, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, man, I don't thank you, God, you know. So
Right.
that's it. So it wasn't, and it was going into a completely different situation where it could be very uncomfortable,
Yeah.
you know. But I didn't have the insecurities that a lot of people do because of, I feel like, humility. Because I had those experiences of doing bad in the
Right.
first year, freshman year of high school, freshman year of undergrad, and because of my relationships with people like you, which is the mindset of, hey, no matter
Right.
where I go, I remember you told me this the first time we met, and that's why I was like, I'm riding with this cat. You're like, yo, it doesn't matter what people do or what's going around me. I feel like my best could beat anybody's
Yeah.
best.
Sure.
And so I took that and I said, you know, I want to go, you know, I have an opportunity to compete at one of the best law schools in the world.
Right.
My competitive drive of being an athlete, you know, my faith in the man upstairs, I'm going, man. Because I
Right.
know for a fact if I'm the best there, there's an argument that I'm the best in the world.
So then, and I think this was good for you to not really, I don't want to say hold grudges, but you know, as you, I'm assuming that as part of that early 27, you know, Georgetown was one of the law schools you applied to that denied you. So to be able to
Mhm.
kind of not hold that against them to say, hey, man, it is what it is. It's an opportunity that end up coming back around, and I'm gonna still, you know, I'm gonna go for it, and I'm gonna not hold that grudge that, oh man, they didn't want me to first. 'Cause, you know, a lot of people take that approach, like they didn't want me before, so you know, screw them or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
But you understood, kept the main thing in terms of you know
Just the
what it
focus.
was that you were trying to accomplish, and
It's the focus. And by the way, I did take offense to people
yeah,
rejecting me because
yeah,
I was like,
yeah,
yeah, because I applied to other schools that rejected me, knowing that I was going to get Georgetown. And when they called me to say, "Hey, we're so excited you can come in," I was just like, "Ah, yeah, I'm not going." So yeah, I've gotten past a lot of that, and the man upstairs worked on my heart, and I
yeah,
prayed for it because I feel like you have to continue to grow spiritually in order to continue to, you know, you're not going to God like he's a vending machine, but you
right,
know, if you draw your power from the man upstairs, you know,
yeah,
you gotta you bow the knee. And so for me, it's like constantly trying to grow spiritually
yeah,
so that way I'm ready to receive the blessings that he sends down. Because he's
right,
not going to let me be anywhere where I just destroy myself
right,
unless it's time for me to go or, you know, it's a learning point. And so I'm trying
right.
to avoid those two situations.
How was that experience? Was it, you know, compared to Michigan State, was it everything you expected, or I know you got a chance to do a lot of great things with different organizations and stuff like that, but just how was Georgetown overall coming from Michigan State?
Um, the people were great. It was outstanding. Same thing. It was challenging though. Where at Michigan State, you know, and I think Barnheiser, our contracts professor, or maybe it was Colt, I can't remember. Both of them guys were amazing. But they put it the best way. They said, "Hey, you know, the law doesn't change. It's really the competition piece. You know,
Yeah,
you're going to take some of the same exams, but if a perfect score or if an A grade means that somebody got 180 points at Georgetown, maybe an A grade means that somebody got 150 points at Michigan State or 140 points at Michigan State. You'll still have people, again, who are unbelievably talented like yourself at other schools that aren't in the top ranks. It's just a matter of when you're dealing, and that's why I love the curve because it's truly a competition. When you're dealing with the curve, you have to do that much more
yeah,
to separate yourself.
yeah,
And so at Michigan State, all I had to do was get the right answer. At Georgetown, I had to get the right answer and then also come with alternative right answers.
right,
And like you're writing storybooks on exams.
yeah, for
And so there
sure.
were a couple of things that I was lacking in. Number one, I didn't know how to type fast. We had typing classes in elementary school. School system I was in wasn't that great. And I was more concerned about getting points on the screen. So I'm, you know, I forgot like woodpecking. I'm looking at the, you know, keyboard, looking at, so I can't type fast. And so I think my average words per minute and I had to calculate, it was like 17 words a minute. It was so bad. It was
Wow.
terrible. And so even if I got the right answer, you know, I'm only wrapping up, call it the exam with, you know, 6,000 words.
Yeah.
My peers at Georgetown were doing 21,000. And
Wow.
so in a game where, you know, you pick up more points for, you know, as many darts you throw on the wall, even if I hit a bullseye, you know, there's somebody who threw 8 bullseyes, 40 outside, you know, and I'm getting blown away. And so that piece was hard. And so I had to go back. I remember and my dad, me and him were back on a relationship, and he was like, because I got my butt kicked the first semester. And he's like, so what are you going to do? I was like, I prayed to be here. I'm going to have faith in the man upstairs, and I'm going to do what I can do best, and that's adapt. And so what I did was, I downloaded and I actually got to pay them. I forgot about this. It was a free keyboard typing speed software. And so throughout from the first day of the second semester all the way through the end, I was learning the keyboard, number one. So I got my minutes up, or my words, from 17 words per minute, which is terrible, to about 66, 67, 70. And I could type now without looking. And I also did every practice exam you could possibly find. And then I also paired myself with students who had gotten A's. And so I was doing practice exams with them, same way I was with you, learning to adapt, figuring out different ways. And so I added more to my playbook. And it's just, and again, I remember I figured out the Z key it's ridiculous because, like, I'm in law school, the top law schools, figured out the Z key, the day before my final exam. And now I was able to compete, so I went in there and I was like, okay, bet, y'all were able to do 90 words a minute. And, if y'all get the right answers, that's why y'all were able to get better points than me. Well, now I can do 70 and I know I'm going to get the right answer. Wow. And so I started cleaning up. The A's just started coming in. And that was a really cool experience because it was growth. It was like the overcoming the things, and just the man upstairs just stretching you, right. Being willing to stretch, being okay with being like, hey, I'm not good now, right. But I know what great looks like. And if I match that and do a little bit more, I'll at least be close to great.
So then, because you even with going to a law school that, again, is a higher ranking law school, you're talking to some real heavy hitters, just not only just in a particular space, but just in the world. Can you talk about, I know, Chris Sachs, the billionaire? You got a chance to
Chris Sacca. So that was the other cool thing too. And they had some dogs there. I mean, like, first of all, our professors, people who argued in Supreme Court, people who were on TV, people who were, I mean, that was a really incredible experience. That's one thing that I cannot, I would never, there's no other law school I would have gone to. That's the one thing I say. I am blessed to have gone there. Went to the 5-year reunion, a few weeks back, and it was just reaffirming, like, man, I am so blessed to have this experience. I wouldn't redo it for anything. But there are some dogs there. Like, I mean, people in our text, so professors write textbooks. In our spot, they write textbooks too. But every now and then you'd find an adjunct professor who didn't write a textbook, and they'd be talking about him in that textbook. There were judges who were like, oh, the crafty lawyers, you can't fall into this. Steve Cooney, I think, was one of them who works at Williams & Connolly, one of the best litigation firms in the world. Eric Brunstad argued the Supreme Court. Like, these are some people who are beasts. Chris Sacca, I had the opportunity to speak with him. He's a billionaire. He went into law for 1 year, jumped out, started doing entrepreneurial stuff, invested in Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, I think, when they were seed stage, and, ended up number 3 on the Midas list, I think, at one point. So that was amazing. And they're all accessible, or most of them accessible. I didn't meet anyone who wasn't. And I remember for Chris Sacca specifically, he told 6 students, including myself, that he was going to give us, I think it was like 15 to 20 minutes where he would talk to us and sit down. Dude sat down from his house in Denver. It was like an hour and 30 minutes just sharing stories. And it was so powerful because there were things in here that he was saying that resonated. And part of it, I wanted to tear up a bit. I was like, most of what I've done has been off of gut feeling, prayer, and Google, like I said. But to hear somebody else saying they were doing those things was incredible. And that's part of what shaped my journey today is, again, talking to partners at these large law firms who made it so that way I could cut certain steps, which is great. Like, so let's say Taylor lost the easy path to getting to a big law firm. Taylor didn't lose the easy path to becoming very successful because I was able to talk to those people.
Right.
And so I was able to make more money than, most of my peers in the world because I listened to those partners who came in and said, hey, you don't want to be me. Same thing I tell my mentees, hey, you don't want to be me. There are people here that are doing it this way, that are doing it this way. Here are the things you need to do. And it's like, man, those things are golden. Yeah.
No, yeah, for sure. And I think kind of speaking of the money, kind of going into, so seems like Georgetown was it worked out really well, and now you're off into the legal space, actually, working at law firms and things like that. And at some point, you find yourself working for, I think it was Latham and Watkins, which is like
Number 2 in the world. Yeah.
two in the world. So, man, you have to sit back at yourself, because there's some things that I do, and I'm like, man, how did I get here? Just kind of blown away with myself. So how was that kind of coming from where you're coming from, more or less, not humble beginnings, but just, a middle class upbringing and going through the adversities with a high school, with undergrad, and transferring from Michigan State to Georgetown, and kind of going through all that, and still, being able to come out on top. You're passing a bar exam, and now you find yourself working for the number 2 law firm in the world. How did things lead up to that? And then as you're like in that place, were you like blown away at yourself, or just amazed of how far you came?
No, and it's weird because somebody brought up to me, they were like, if you look back, what would you think of yourself if you went back and talked to yourself 5 years ago? And 5 years ago, I'd be like, oh man, I made it. I'd be telling myself like, oh, I made it, but I don't feel that way right now.
Yeah.
And then same thing, 5 years before that, they'd have been telling, you made it Georgetown, you made it. It's like, but when I was at Georgetown, I didn't feel that way. And there's 2 parts to this. Number 1, I'm never really blown away. I am, like I said, I try to do the humility thing too, but at the same time, I'm my father's son. So, I got that dog in me. So it's like, when I get there, again, back to the same thing you said, my best beats anyone else's best.
Right.
And people may do things that are better than what I do. There's, some things around consistency, which are people are really good at, but I know for a fact at the end of the day, there's 24 hours in the day. As long as there's no Mike Ross to do from Suits who could, read a book once and remember every single word, as long as that person doesn't exist, there's no reason why you can't compete with everyone.
Right.
You've got people, the former head of Goldman Sachs, I think, who had, dyslexia or something like that. You got people like that out there who just have the dog in them, man.
Yeah.
So I've never been blown away. Now, when I'm sitting on $1 billion in my account, then I'll be like, wow, Dave, this is incredible. Who would have thought, But no, I didn't feel blown away. And in terms of what got me there, I'd say I went from being one of the least sought out attorneys, or, people, to being one of the most. And that was a really cool experience.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I remember going from a place where like I was getting rejected from firms that I didn't even apply to. And that was actually a funny moment in my life. Cause I was like, I don't even know who y'all are. And they're like, I tell you, I want you to know, man, you ain't cut out to be here. And I was like, who are you people? And that was a funny moment. And then, I hit a point where, because once my grades, the A's started rolling and people started saying, oh, well, you're overqualified to come here. And I'm like, what? But it's, but again, it's you believe in the man upstairs and he takes you certain ways. And that's kind of what leads to who you are. And so for me, the rejections forced me to go speak to people. The rejections forced me to speak to the Chris Sakas, the Mark Whitakers, the Eric Brunstads, Steve Cooney's. It forced me to go speak to those people to figure out, hey, how do I get to you? Or how do I get to be an associate? And they were like, no, you're focused on the wrong thing. You want to see how to become a very, very profitable partner. This is the route. And I haven't reached that route yet, but I'm still, but based on how things have played out since then, it's gotten so much easier. And so I loved being at Latham. It was fun to be able to compete. I had some people there who were just brilliant, man. There was one guy there, Ryan Meyerson. I've never seen anything like it. Like he's been in the game for a while, but we were on a call and he didn't need to go back and check anything. It wasn't like, oh, let me go check to see if this law play. He was just knew it offhand. Absolute dog. Yeah. And so it was a really cool experience. It's really great because it's self-validating to say, I'm here and I'm not getting blown away.
Right. Oh, that's cool. And so now, man, I think this is a good lead into the next kind of part where, okay, you're making money. I mean, you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, this is money that it's really good money. It's really good money. You're not, living paycheck to paycheck anymore. You're, you get a chance to do some really good things, live in great areas, travel, and but from an investment standpoint, you're making good money. So how do you say, okay, now I have to grow this money? I just can't get the money and spend it. Okay, I'm maybe invest in a 401k, things like that. But how do you make the decision of where to invest your money at this point?
And it's hard, honestly, for me to say good money. And that's why I encourage people to Google, find out what's out there. So you can go to
Right.
vault.com. That was the website I showed you when we were first
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
and freshmen first year law students.
Yeah.
It lays out the salaries. I came out of Georgetown making 200K. You can go look that up.
Yeah.
That's the base salary for a first year associate. And that goes up to like, 300-400 grand. Then you're not even talking bonuses.
Yeah.
But you can actually tangibly go and Google that and see what these people make.
For sure.
And I'll tell you, that's nothing, man. You see our clients, man, there's a guy who's making like 12 million a quarter. And so when you look at what you're doing, I mean, comparison is the thief of joy, but sometimes so is reality. So it's like you look at that stuff and you're like, I'm doing well. I'm doing better than again my family's ever done.
There's levels to it, though.
There's levels to it, man. There's levels to it. I got to go to work on Monday. And that's what the part I love that Mark Whitaker said that to me, man. He's a partner. I was like, man, you make millions of dollars. You're a partner. I want to be like you. I'm second year in law or third year in law school. And he's like, yo, I got to go to work on Monday. That's as real as it comes. I was like, he's right. Like I can't just kick my feet up and then, see my phone, somebody call him like, maybe later. No, somebody call, I got to pick that thing up. So, in terms of good money, am I able to do things with it? That's cool. Yes. But I mean, am I where I see myself being or where I want to be? No, it's constant growth. But yeah, no, it's really cool. The freedom to be able to make investments, the freedom to be able to take your cash and say, hey, I'm not using this on living expenses. I'm not using this on, necessities. I'm not using this on things that I want, but I'm going to use this on something that's going to generate more income down the road. That's a really cool space to be in, but I wouldn't by any means say that, it's good money. I don't want to knock anyone's situation.
No, yeah, for sure. And I guess my whole thing is more so trying to figure out, okay, you're making good money or you're making money. You're making money that you can invest now. It's not just, I think, again, a big part of the channel is when you're making, what they say the average person makes 40 grand or 50 grand a year. As an individual, you for the most part, you're living paycheck to paycheck, and it's virtually impossible to have enough money to actually be able to do anything else with that outside of just the bare minimum, pay your rent, pay your, your car note, maybe your bills, food, things like that. So now you're at least making money that you can, take and invest 20, 30,000 in this business or maybe in this deal and that deal. So how do you at this point, make the decision or determination of, hey, I'm gonna invest in this business or I'm gonna invest in this real estate deal, or what's your investment vehicle and how do you come to the, what things do you consider when it's time to kind of invest money in these different businesses?
And that's the cool thing about my practice, private equity, mergers and acquisitions. I see this stuff every day. I've been seeing it every day for the past 6 years or so. And so I tend to say, okay, I'm not, first of all, stock market, unless we're in a downturn, I don't play it. We just don't have enough money to see any real value. If I had, $20 million to throw in the stock market, then, 12% increase, that's pretty cool, but at our stage, it's just hundreds of thousands. You're not really doing anything.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I agree with that. And I kind of made a mistake on that, but I mean, it is what it is. It's a learning experience, but
again, unless it's a downturn. I told you I made 80K off the airlines when they were down, even though Warren Buffett said don't. I was like, I'm in the airport right now, which kind of goes into one of the points. If I can see it or if I have experience in that space, I'll put cash behind it or I'll put sweat equity. I love putting sweat equity. That's not dollars out my pocket. That's one thing. So if I have some sort of experience where I know I can help the business out, then I'll do it. The second thing is if the founder is somebody who I can really believe in, and really it's just like, it's always a scale. It's a sliding scale. I'll put more in if you've done something similar and, you've been successful at it than I will if, I just met you and you seem really gung ho about it.
Right.
So there's that, but I try to stick to spots that I have some sort of tangible, experience in. The one exception would be, there's two exceptions. One good exception would be the gym, the fitness studios.
Yeah.
I don't have a tangible experience running a fitness studio, but the guy I invested in, he did. They turned 300K into 1.2 in revenues. 300K investment into 1.2 in annual revenues in a matter of like 2.5, 3 years. And so their vision is ridiculous. ridiculous. So when I
Right.
got the opportunity to put in cash and help out with the legal stuff, because everyone needs a lawyer,
Yep.
this was really cool. Um, that was really a cool opportunity, and we're still going. They're opening up their third location. They're in Milwaukee, the Loop in Chicago, and now in Lincoln Park. Um, but it's a really cool studio. And the goal is, we marked, we're like, hey, if you can get 10 of these off the ground, we can sell for, around 20 mil, which would be really cool.
So
Oh,
so
sorry, go
then,
ahead.
I guess, and that's cool. I think you have mentioned something that I want to kind of unpeel a little bit. You're talking about that sweat
Mhm,
equity, and
mhm.
I think that's important because I always tell people, hey, go get a skill, whether it's IT, whether it's engineering, whether it's law. Obviously, there's various of kind of areas in each one of these things, but being able to have some skill that people finds value in and that you can leverage to get equity in these companies,
Yeah.
even if you don't necessarily invest from a cash standpoint, but you can invest your time and your skill set and be able to kind of take equity in a company, especially at the beginning stages. So, can you talk about that a little bit and how putting sweat equity into a number of companies have helped you gain equity in gain equity in these different companies?
Yeah, that's the blessing. So the cool thing about it is, my job's expensive.
Mm.
At the most, I think right now I've billed and like I think $1,216, something, I was about to say ridiculous, but I
That's
can't say that
crazy.
'cause I'm on camera. That's like $1,216. I don't see all that, of course.
All right, for sure.
But
That's crazy for a billing rate of an attorney, just like you said,
exactly.
1,200. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's what I'm saying. So if you think about that, so in order to get the same exact service, a small startup would have to be willing to pay that amount of money, and an hour goes by very fast.
Yeah,
I can't even
absolutely.
finish a document in an hour. So,
Yep,
who has the ability to go and say, yo, I'm going to spend, 40 hours on Taylor to get me up and running?
yep,
Unless you already established, not many people. And so it's easy to come in. And because I'm good at what I do, it's easy to come in and then help somebody take away the headache. You know what I mean?
right,
So, for example, for the gym person, he's not a legal guy. He
right,
knows fitness. He knows how to sell
for
fitness.
sure.
You know, legal stuff is a headache to him. So
Yep,
how can I come in and take away the headache? And so that's what people should be trying to do is develop a skill that takes away headaches from people. And if you can
yep,
take away a headache, you can get equity. That's usually the trade-off.
for sure.
Um, and so, whether it's again legal, IT, finance, and then you just have to value that. You say, okay, cool. How big of a headache is it? Because legal can be huge. It
Absolutely.
really can mess people up. So it's like to be able to do that, that's valuable to people. So I'm going to be more valuable than somebody who comes in and says, hey, I can help you build a website, perhaps, unless if the foundation of the business is that website. But it's,
Right.
develop your skill, whether it is a website, whether it's finance skills. People need CFOs.
Yep.
People need somebody to look at documents or look at numbers and paint a picture so they can raise capital. And a lot of times with these startups, they just don't have money to put into those headaches. And so again,
Right.
if you can come in and alleviate that because you developed your skill set, then guess what? Now you become valuable.
Right.
And if you're not trying to get paid because you already have, other income coming in, you don't have to be greedy. You can say, yo, keep that money to grow the business. I'm going to help you out. And I'm only, taking a little bit of percentage in this or based on how much you need me.
Right,
So
for sure. And then another thing, and that's great information. That's great advice. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think
mm,
just having a skill, taking away that headache from someone, and especially if that skill is valuable and costs money, uh, and it's a big headache for people who, a lot of times you run in these businesses, you like fitness, or you are in particular thing that the business you enjoy the particular like actual business uh like the business thing that you're in. I'm not probably saying it the best way for it, but again, for the gym example, he loves fitness, but
mhm.
when you're running a business, it's not just fitness, it's legal, it's accounting, it's a lot of different things that
Mhm.
comes along with that if you don't typically enjoy that, uh then you either need to farm that out or else your business is going to suffer if you just kind of continue to neglect it. So I think
Mhm.
that's good advice. So, wait, what vehicle are you driving these days, man? I know you at one point had the Porsche. I know you had purchased your father a Porsche. What vehicle are you driving these
I
days?
was gonna say the 911 down south,
Okay, okay.
2022. But I got the Audi e-tron GT.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
so I gotta say GT, whoever named it Audi, kind of gets on me a little bit because people are like, oh, the SUV. I'm like, nah, bruh. My car starts at 108. You know what I'm saying?
And that's cool. And I guess I kind of want to end with two things here. So
Mhm.
I know you have a company, LNG, which kind of deals with electric vehicles.
Mhm.
Did you purchasing that electric vehicle have kind of anything to do with getting off into this particular the business LNG that kind of deals with charging stations, or was it just kind of happenstance that?
No, that's exactly right. So
Okay,
feeling a need, the experience. So
yeah,
I'm driving around in my car and I'm like, yo, I got, each battery gives me about 250 miles. And so, I'm getting down to like 40 miles. And I'm like, oh, let me go charge up. And, I look on the app and I just like pick a location. I show up, it's a cornfield, not a literal cornfield, but there's
yeah,
nothing there.
yeah,
And I'm like, all right, I got 25 miles left. So that means I can only make one more mistake. That's it. And, by the grace of God, I pulled into the right place, but 9 out of the 10 stations were broken.
yeah,
And so I was like, this is a nightmare. And so for the other business delivery, we're fully electric there. And so it's all e-vehicles. And my fear was that from a logistics nightmare standpoint, if somebody's got to make 9 deliveries, but they
yeah.
only have 30 miles left and they don't know where they're going to charge, that's death by 1,000 cuts. Because now we have 9 customers who are going to complain, say, hey,
Right.
we didn't get our stuff. And 9 customers who now don't believe that when they place an order on our site, they're not going to get their order, that they are going to get their order. So back to, again, the experience piece. It's hey, do I have any experience in this space?
Yeah.
Can I add value, and how tangible, how feasible is it for me to do it? I may have experience working with computers. I'm not going to start a computer company. You
Right.
know what I mean? But if it's something where I can pull the pieces together, where, let's say I knew the person who did make computers and, there was a really great market opportunity, then I would do it. And so
Okay.
in this instance with electric vehicles, my experience is I drive an electric vehicle. I know how often I charge. I have somebody who can put the stations in there,
Yeah.
and there's a massive market opportunity. And so I'm doing it.
Okay. Okay. Oh yeah, I mean that's great. I think I just want to kind of end with this last question. Kind of going into the current events and trying to incorporate that into investing and uh, uh, kind of what can we glean from I guess the different current events as it relates to investing and making money and not fumbling in the bag and things like that. So recently Kanye West he was in the news, got a lot of partnerships dropped on as it relates to some comments. I guess my question to you is it anything that kind of, well, first off, are you familiar with that situation? And then secondly, is it anything that you kind of took from that situation that you're gonna maybe implement or make sure you do or don't do going forward as it relates to uh, kind of not fumbling a bag? And obviously, we don't want to silence people, so we don't want to say, hey, don't get your things that you're passionate about out, especially if
Mhm.
it's like injustices and things like that. And I'm not saying that this was an injustice, but how do you kind of take that situation to make sense of it and kind of be able to apply it to your life so that you can kind of essentially be better from it? Because that's what I try to do. I try to kind of learn from these situations. What they say, a wise man makes a wise man learn from others' mistakes. So how do you kind of take what's going on with that, and especially with the financial loss? I think what he said, he lost like $2 billion in like a
Mhm.
day. So how do you take that and kind of apply it to your life so that you kind of don't kind of fumble the bag or uh, yeah, fumble the bag or lose out on kind of deals going forward as it relates to a similar experience.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying first, like, do you even know about the situation? Because
Yeah,
the
yeah.
reality is, a lot of times I don't stay current on what's going on
I
if
mean,
it's about just pop culture, but I do for this one because
yeah,
Kanye's Black Billionaire.
for sure.
And so there's a couple of things, one, with the whole mental health aspect of it, I don't know, what's going on in Kanye's life.
Yeah,
And, Kanye's made $1 billion, so I really can't, speak on
yeah,
whether what he's doing is right or wrong, other than I know what he's saying impacts people. And I
yeah,
have a lot of Jewish friends.
yeah.
Um, that sounds like a terrible statement. I have a lot of black friends,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
that's,
yeah,
yeah, but
yeah,
no, I actually do. Like they're my investors, everyone on my cap table is Jewish. But you're dealing with people, and so it's tough, man. It's really tough because, again, I don't know from a mental health standpoint where he's at,
yeah,
and it's hard for me to speak on his future when, in his past I wasn't speaking on his future. I didn't know Kanye would be a billionaire,
yeah, for
so I
sure.
don't know what his game plan is, or what his values are really. Um, and it's sad because like you see somebody in the media and you look at it and you're like, man, back in the day, I listened, I jammed Kanye stuff,
Yeah.
and like to some degree, he's like a hero, or
Yeah.
he was a hero, in terms of how he operates, how he breaks into spaces. He's the guy who they said is just the beats guy. And
Yeah.
he was like, no, I can rap. And you see him, you watch the interview or the Netflix series, you see it, and you're like, yo, you see him going into to Rockefeller, and he's playing his tapes, and people are like ignoring
Yeah.
him, and
Yeah.
you see that person, and it's like that stuff. It's hard to see somebody, as they call it, fall from grace. That said, he's been falling and come back up every
Yeah.
single time. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
history remains to be seen in terms of where he ends up.
Yeah.
In terms of pitfalls, again, he's done more than I've done in my life, so I really can't say
That's true.
he's made pitfall other than, again, how is what you're saying impacting the lives of people around you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it hurting people? Are there people who watch the video and go, man, I'm a Kanye fan, but I'm Jewish, and like that hurts to hear that,
Yeah.
So it's like, from a business perspective, I can't speak on it because people, Kanye losing $2 billion is nothing. Jeff Bezos, I always go back to him, and Elon and those guys, they lost like 14 billion separately each,
Yeah.
in like one afternoon one time. That's when I had to reassess my goals. I was like, these dudes lost $14 billion in an afternoon, and I'm talking about that's the goal. That's
Yeah.
like, so there's that. But yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough. I'm not one of those people that, I wish I could talk to Kanye. I
Yeah.
can't say nothing to him that's gonna make him change whatever he's doing or what he,
Yeah.
this dude, he's fully formed, So, if anything, I hope that, he's okay, and I hope that, you know, he's, able to avoid hurting people for the expense of publicity.
Right.
And I hope that, you know, I wish it's hard to wish any bad on anybody. And I hope that the people who have felt hurt do recover and know that, not everyone has that mindset towards them.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Right.
Well, no, yeah, and I think that's a good place to end. Yeah, I think, like you said, I think you have put it perfectly. When your words and the things that you say are impacting others, especially hurting others, then you have to kind of be very careful on how you kind of navigate that that realm. But yeah, hopefully, obviously, we wish Kanye all the best going forward. And as someone who, like you said, we grew up on his music, it was inspiring. The Netflix documentary that we saw, the Genius, I think that was very inspiring to me. And he does a lot of uh, good things that I look at that's inspiring. Like you said, breaking into different areas and being successful at them. That's something that I'm pretty sure a lot of us look up to him for things like that. But yeah, it's definitely a serious thing when you are, hurting, talking, saying words that impact others negatively, and so that's a tough one. We all have to be careful when we start kind of crossing over into that territory. But hey, man, Weave, I appreciate you taking some time out here to kind of talk to me. I know we kind of talked about a lot of different things. I think this was very helpful. I think the TEI family, they're going to be able to get a lot of gold nuggets that you talked about today, and hopefully they can apply them, and we can have some of the success that you have had at least this far. And again, that's another big thing that I'm excited on. Again, we're early 30s, and this whole thing of work for 30, 40 years and kind of live a good life on the back end. It's like, no, you can live a good life on the back end, but you can also live a good life in your like late 20s, in your 30s, and maybe even in your early to mid 20s, depending on what it is that you're doing. But you can live a good life and live comfortably, and take trips, take care of your family and friends, and just enjoy life. And you don't necessarily have to do that on the back end. But if you get a skill and you're intentional about things, and what you're doing and the moves that you're making, man, you can really live a good life
And it does
now
take,
as well as on the back end.
yeah, and that's a good point. It does take sacrifice though. So like you're gonna have to struggle at some point. I mean, maybe you
Yeah,
don't. Good for you. But like I told you before, I hadn't been out the country before this year
yeah,
because I was like, yo, if I go overseas, I'm gonna want to spend it the way that I want
yeah,
to spend it. And so it's like, yeah, I hadn't gone over the country. I was the only one in law school who hadn't gone. Everyone talks about stuff, and but this year was the first time. And man, I went to Italy, Austria. I
yeah,
spent a month in Colombia.
Yeah.
And I'm not sitting there, backpacking it.
Right.
I'm living like king. So that was cool, So,
For sure,
but
for
yeah,
sure.
no, the goal is to continue to increase that. So yeah.
Oh yeah, and yeah, all this stuff takes sacrifice, man. Undergrad, law school, man, my whole 20s, I'm early 30s now, but for the better part of my 20s, man, we was working,
Grinding. Yeah.
sacrificing, grinding, like you said. So this stuff does take sacrifice. But if you can sacrifice, 7 to 10 years, man, I think you really set yourself up
Yep.
to be able to start to do some big things. And for a lot of this stuff to come, like you said, easier. It's not as hard to kind of do deals or get into different spaces,
Mhm.
just because you have, a skill, or you have, a little bit more experience, and kind of know what it is that you're doing and how to navigate the waters and how to reach out to different people who are necessary for whatever it is that you're trying to do. So, now we appreciate you again. I think again that's a wrap for today's episode of the Everyday Investor, and hopefully again you all, the TEI family, take something from Taylor. Man, he shared again a lot of good nuggets with us that we all can take and apply and kind of increase in some capacity. And until next time, take care.
Cool. All right, bro.
All
Thanks.
right, yeah,
Appreciate it.
no problem.